It's been a very eventful offseason for the Carolina Hurricanes. Some players lost, some players brought in. Zachary Martin of Locked On Hurricanes joins us to talk about that and their outlook for the upcoming season next on the Locked On NHL podcast.
You're Locked On NHL, your daily podcast on the National Hockey League. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Gil Martin here, and welcome everybody to the Monday edition of the Locked On NHL podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I want to thank everyone who makes Locked On NHL your first listen every day. Don't forget to subscribe on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts so you never miss a show. Today's episode is brought to you by Indeed. Still searching for a great candidate for your company? Don't search, just match with Indeed. Start hiring now with a $75 sponsored job credit to upgrade your job post at Indeed.com/lockedon. Terms and conditions apply. Need to hire? You need Indeed. It is my pleasure to welcome back to the show the host of Locked On Hurricanes, Zachary Martin. And Zach, first of all, it's great to talk to you when our two teams are not going head-to-head in a playoff series. So good to see you. And certainly been a very busy offseason for the Canes. Let's start with some of the guys that departed Raleigh, which I think was kind of expected, but not necessarily easy.
Yeah, no. Well, first of all, thank you, Gil, as always, for the invite. It's always fun to talk to you on the Locked On AHL, as always. Yeah, it's been a interesting offseason, to say the least. I know with a lot of cap restrictions coming up, I know the cap did go up, but a lot of guys weren't going to get paid. You thought maybe a couple were going to leave, but just the fact of how many left and how quick it happened too does come as a shock, because you're talking Teuvo Teravainen, and you lost one of your top six guys. You lose your entire second D pair in Brady Skjei and Brett Pesce. You also lose your Swiss Army knife, of Steph Nason, who is your bottom six guy, but who can also play on the power play too, because he's your net front presence guy. So yeah, a lot of departures really quickly, and it's a lot of rearranging the deck chairs on the Titanic on the fly, if you really want to look at it that way. So yeah, it's day one of free agency was a little bit chaotic, and it was caused just not how the Hurricanes wanted it to be caused. That's for sure.
And, Rod Brind'amour was pretty frank about it, that he was not thrilled with losing all of these players.
Yeah, and it's rightfully so. And yeah, it's tough because he even says, you don't want to get those phone calls of guys that you've had for a long time. Brett Pesce was drafted by the team. Him and Jacob Slavin were the top D pair through pretty much the back end of the dark ages before Rod Brind'amour became the head coach of the team and stuff like that. You got Brady Skjei in a trade, back in 2020, basically was one of the offensive standouts for the blue line and stuff like that. Teuvo Teravainen's been with the team for 8 seasons now. So yeah, you're losing a lot of guys you kind of leaned on for a good part of the last 6 seasons, and at various times. So yeah, it's not good when you have a lot of guys leaving, especially too when you lose your GM, president, and all that too, and what else. Yeah, a lot of changes in the first few weeks of the offseason for sure.
So how does the team address this? Who steps up to fill these voids?
Mm-hmm. Well, luckily the Hurricanes, while they did lose guys, they also did get a lot of guys in free agency as well. You got Sean Walker to a 5-year deal, really good AAV. I think it's like 3.6. You go get Shane Gostisbehere back. We already saw what he did in his limited time with the Hurricanes in 22-23. Did get him at the trade deadline from the Arizona Coyotes for like a draft pick, and that was really about it. Played really well, threw him on the power play unit, did a good job as well. Now you got him locked in for 3 seasons at 3.2. So you got your Brett Pesce replacement in Sean Walker, and you get your Brady Skjei replacement in Shane Gostisbehere. And Ghost had a really good season. Stats, if you look at the stats comparables, Ghost had a better stats-wise season than Brady Skjei did. And the fact that too is you also lock in Jalen Chatfield for 3 seasons as well. So those 3 guys combined of Gostisbehere, Chatfield, and Walker, they all came in at around $10 million, where Skjei and Pesce 12.5 respectively for those two, what their teams they went to. So yeah, you knew those guys were going to get paid. Unfortunately, you couldn't keep them at the price they wanted in those certain terms, but you got great replacements in guys who are kind of younger, and you can give them a good AAV. So yeah, it's just trying to find guys who are that good caliber on cheaper-ish deals that kind of work out that gives you the flexibility. Because right now the Hurricanes still sit at $6 million in cap space still. So all in all, not too bad, all things considered, for Eric Tulsky and his welcome to NHL free agency as the head honcho of the Carolina Hurricanes are off the rip. So yeah, it's been definitely a wild one.
How do you feel he's done so far as the new GM? And then what do you expect to be different under his tutelage than under the past regime?
I think so far he's done pretty good, for the fact that you look at how you go from the exit interviews of the Hurricanes to not too long after they got eliminated from the playoffs, and then a week later Don Waddell's gone, then he's an interim, having to go through your first draft, then you go through your first free agency and you still go and get guys that you need a replacement. You get Jack Roslovic. You also get the depth players of Eric Robinson, Tyson Jost, stuff like that, Riley Stillman. I think he's done a pretty good job overall. In terms of how the regime is going to be, he's even said it too, and even assistant general manager Darren York even addressed it too, is there's no really a difference in how they do things. It's still a collaborative effort with them, Rod, Tom Dundon, and stuff like that. Now there's they added some extra bodies into kind of fill the void of a few other things as well. The fact that with Eric Tulsky moving up, you got to figure out what you want to do with your head, the head of the pro scouts. That's what Eric Tulsky did. You also got head of analytics and stuff like that too. So it's just kind of trying to get the extra bodies to come in to kind of fill in some spots. But other than that, the philosophy is not really changing. They have their own way of addressing players and looking at analytics, what terms of contracts and stuff but it's still a collaborative effort. It's just a different name under GM, and then just going on from there.
Right now, we're still a couple of months away from the season or from training camp. What's your biggest concern facing this team?
I see right now is just trying to figure out what terms and what your contracts you're looking at for your 3 restricted free agents, because you still got Jack Drury as an RFA who's going to arbitration. Same thing for Martin Necas. Early on, Gil, I know you probably know, everyone and their mothers talked about Martin Necas. Who do you want to go trade for him? What can be the asking price? Now, apparently, he's also going to arbitration with the Canes. It sounds like he does kind of want to stay. I guess they're trying to figure out, do you get a deal done before that, or do you go to arbitration? So who knows what's going on with that situation overall. And then you got to worry about Seth Jarvis. Now, he's not arbitration eligible, but he did get a qualifying offer. And now it's, do you bring him a bridge, or do you give him a full-term 7-8 year deal? And I've suggested go down the middle, give him a 5-year deal, take him until he's 27, because Sebastian Aho got his contract at 26. Why give it to Seth at 27 and give him that 7-8 year deal then when he's 27? You got him locked in until he's 34, 35. He's a Hurricane for life. So my main concern right now, lock up your 3 RFAs, because you got your first and second right wing spots open and your 4th center. You bring those 3 guys back, forward core is done. Throw Jack Roslovic to the left side in your second line, and there you go. There's your 12 guys for the forwards, and you already know who your healthy got, your extra scratches are at that point. So lock up your RFAs. That's the last thing you really got to worry about at this point if you're the Hurricanes.
So from your perspective right now, is this a better team than the team that finished last season, or is it too early to tell?
Oh, geez. That's a good question. I think it's still a little too early to tell. Will I think that they're going to be fighting for the division? Maybe. I would still be optimistic that they could win the division, but I'm more so on they're going to make the playoffs still for the 7th straight time. I think that is still doable for the Hurricanes. I think it's very, very likely it's going to happen. It's just, are you looking at second or third in the division? I'm not really sure. It's just depending on how New Jersey does and how the rest of the division looks as well. So they might have taken a slight step back, because they've also talked about maybe looking at some of their youngsters like Felix Sorum, Bradley Nadeau, Jackson Blake. Do we see those guys come up at some point? So it's just it's a lot of unknowns right now, but I'd still say this is still a playoff team. It's just where in the terms of the division they're going to be at. And yeah, it's going to be very interesting to see. I think it's, like I said, it's a little bit of a dip if you really want to look at it, but overall, this is still a playoff team.
All right. Zach, why don't you tell our viewers and our listeners where they could find the podcast and where they could find you on social media?
Yeah, pretty simple. I'm on X at OneTrueZach. I have a link tree if you want to look up all my articles that I do and along with where to find the podcast. The podcast on X, it's LO_Hurricanes. And you can check out where to watch and listen on there every Monday through Friday. We'll have links to, go check it out. So, yeah.
All right, Zach, thanks so much. Always a pleasure.
Hey, as always, thanks, Gil. Really appreciate this.
Today's episode is brought to you by Indeed. We're all driven by the search for better, but when it comes to hiring, the best way to search for a candidate isn't to search at all. Don't search, match with Indeed. If you need to hire, you need Indeed. Indeed is your matching and hiring platform with more than 350 million global monthly visitors, according to Indeed data, and a matching engine that helps you find quality candidates fast. Ditch the busy work. Use Indeed for scheduling, screening, and messaging so you can connect with candidates faster. And listeners of this show will get a $75 sponsored job credit to get your jobs more visibility at Indeed.com/lockedon. Just go to Indeed.com/lockedon right now and support our show by saying you heard it about Indeed on this podcast. That's Indeed.com/lockedon. Terms and conditions apply. Need to hire? You need Indeed.